Crypto investors who buy in 2025 are front-running the biggest cycle that we've seen in the history of US debt. There is a record amount of cash sitting in money market funds, cash that is collecting interest. And as of this month, we've gotten confirmation that effectively there is a ticking time bomb on the US debt system. There is a debt spiral that if investors front run the changes happening there, they will be getting ahead of one of the biggest wealth transfers and one of the biggest financial gold rushes that we've ever seen. And that's because this $7.2 trillion is all being parked in US money markets with the expectation that this capital is being rewarded with a high interest rate, pretty much risk-free. But the problem is that there is a tremendous amount of risk in this system. It's just not obvious yet. And that's because Elon Musk, arguably one of the smartest people in the world, certainly one of the most effective people in the world, and Donald Trump, love him or hate him, one of the most powerful and influential US presidents that we have ever seen. Together, they couldn't cut the US deficit by a single percent. And that's because even the cuts that Doge made, the Republican-led Congress was unwilling to codify into law. There's no will on either side of the aisle to cut even one dime of spending from the US national budget. The US is full-on addicted, heroin junkie style to overspending. And the recent big, beautiful spending bill that's being backed by the Republicans, well, it is actually one of the biggest extensions of that overspending we've ever seen. In the words of billionaire investor Chamath, it is the anti-Doge.
This thing is like anti-Doge. If Doge was meant to be a reflection of the American voting population's desire for meaningful reform in government, cost controls, some form of austerity, and to get this debt spiral in check, this is the opposite of that.
Now, what Chamath is pointing out here is that essentially there's no will on either side of the aisle, specifically with the Republicans, even with Trump himself, to push for spending cuts. This whole, we're going to cut the deficit, we're going to spend wisely, we're going to put Main Street first, that is done, that is gone. Because the reality is there's no stopping this train. And while we knew that was the case for the last few years, seeing Elon, Trump, and all the people around them fail to make even 1 inch of progress on overspending pretty much solidifies that we will never see this happen in our lifetimes until the system falls apart. And as Chamath says here, that means the market is risk off with this much money in money markets. So all of this growth in Bitcoin has been risk off growth, which means as much as we feel like the market views Bitcoin as this hugely risky thing, that's not the actual signal that we're getting from the market. People are actually buying Bitcoin as a hedge against the overspending of the government. We know that the US cannot afford to keep paying extremely high long-term rates on the debt. So they will need to cut rates and just accept a higher rate of inflation. I mean, they're pretty much accepting it now with this spending bill, saying, you know what, inflation, we can't control it. We just need to keep giving our constituents stuff. So we'll just keep passing the stuff, keep overspending. And here is how the federal funds rate works. They raise it over the course of about 2 to 3 years. This is how it's worked since 2000. They started raising in June 2004 and it went all the way until 2006 and then it leveled off and then they slowly cut and then it came all the way down to zero by 2008. And they started again in 2016 all the way to 2019, about 2 to 3 years here. Then they slowly cut, then boom to zero. And this recent time we started in 2022 all the way to 2023, not even 2 years, and then we've leveled off and now we're coming down. So the next part is the drop off to zero. And they have to because the debt is spiraling out of control. They can't afford to pay that much in interest rates. They need to drive money back into the markets. And when they do that, those $7 trillion will be looking for a home. What we've seen so far is just the early phase. This is the risk off phase in which Bitcoin went from 15K all the way up to $113,000. And that's why there's been so much pain and despair in the altcoin sector, is because when the market turns risk on, all of a sudden Ethereum, the new tech, the new exciting innovations within crypto will all of a sudden be where risk capital goes to seek out supernatural rewards. Right now, it's sitting in money markets. But the problem is that those money markets, that debt system is broken and that the US cannot afford to keep paying for that unless they actually start printing money and buying their own debt. And that is going to devalue the dollar. That is going to devalue everything. And the dollar will now need to seek out other places to earn yield, to earn upside, because dollar on dollar rewards are not going to cut it. And the investors that front run this, the investors that see this coming, that see the writing on the wall, that treasury bonds, that US government debt has a toxicity underlying it, and that they need to get out of that system and into the new system. They're going to front run not just 7 trillion, but probably a lot larger than that, amounts of money that are going to start seeking their way to get out of the fiat debt-based monetary system. What I find is very interesting here is Bitcoin has a risk on and a risk off reputation. It's got both. When things are good and things are hot, Bitcoin is like a higher beta version of the stock market. It's like NASDAQ on steroids. When it's risk off, it's like gold on steroids. And as my buddy Will Clemente says here, if Bitcoin gets memed into being both the fastest horse when risk is ripping and seen as a safe haven and reserve asset, then it's over. We win. I echoed that. Yep, we won. And of course, now Bitcoin's benefiting from this whole treasury asset thing. Trump, his media group that owns Truth Social, plans to raise $3 billion to buy Bitcoin and crypto. A new MicroStrategy has entered the arena, and this is just the start. This is the massive trend that is going to fuel Bitcoin moving hundreds of thousands of dollars up, because you're going to have essentially the whole stock market is going to be turned into proxies for Bitcoin. There's going to be a whole sector of the stock market where all those companies do is issue debt and buy Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is diluting the ever-loving hell out of their shareholders to buy more Bitcoin. And now there's, of course, 21, which we talked about, which is between Cantor Fitzgerald, USD Tether, and Jack Mallers. They're going to be buying more Bitcoin. And finally, we have our first Ethereum treasury company with the Ethereum co-founder, Joseph Lubin. He just took a company called SharpLink Gaming, and they announced a $425 million strategic Ethereum reserve. This is the new MicroStrategy of ETH. Now, it's worth noting, and this is a good take, that these crypto acquisition vehicles are going to end in tiers, according to Mippo here. He thinks that Trump's involvement is essentially doing more harm than good, and then it gives Dems ammo to claim positive crypto regulation is a conflict of interest. Clearly, we're getting some regulation through. I don't know if that's going to stop regulation, but essentially goes into a much longer take here, saying that this is going to be our systemic risk point. Back in 2022, there was a lending issue where all of a sudden, when certain loans weren't repaid, there was holes in the balance sheet at Celsius and then FTX and Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, and there was this whole lending collapse that happened in 2022. That's kind of what they think is going to happen here, where effectively you have all this debt built up to buy Bitcoin with the expectation of returns, and if the Bitcoin doesn't go up enough or starts, worst case, dropping a lot in value, which Bitcoin is known to do, that it will cause some kind of debt spiral with a lot of these companies that might blow up. Again, we'll keep an eye on this, but usually things will go way up before they implode. So who knows if this is actually going to have an implosion. And it's worth noting that MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor might actually be many steps ahead and probably much safer in doing this than these other new companies. But without predicting and trying to crystal ball on who's going to explode in 3 years from now because their Bitcoin treasury strategy, the point is that this is the new narrative, which is that all these public companies are now going to be saving in Bitcoin. We told you it was coming. Now it's happening at a much more increased pace. And essentially the president turning his publicly traded company into a Bitcoin treasury company like MicroStrategy that makes it more of a Bitcoin meme coin. I just think things are going to get a bit silly, but it's probably going to be very bullish for price. Back to the point that I was making here is this chart that you see here is a risk-off chart. Money going vertical in money markets means that people are seeking safety. And during a time that people are seeking safety, we've seen Bitcoin climb to now historically high Bitcoin dominance levels. But that trend is going to reverse. It has to reverse because the US cannot sustain this level of debt. It cannot sustain these high interest rates without something breaking. And if something breaks and they need to print money to buy their own debt, you can again see Bitcoin go swiftly to $1 million. But on top of that, that would introduce insane amounts of new money into the system, which would find their way into risk assets. So you can slice it a lot of different ways. But this chart that you see here, to me, this is Bitcoin dominance. This is altcoin despair in one chart. And it's a chart that will roll over and reverse. And we know that interest rates, as they reverse, when the Fed does reverse them, they slam down to zero. They go up for years and then slam down to zero very fast. Up for years, slam to zero. Up for years, falling off. Let's see what happens next, because most likely that's going to slam to zero. And those $7.2 trillion are going to come flooding into risk assets. They're going to send things on the stock market way up in value, exotic new technologies, AI companies, and of course, our beloved altcoins. Not all altcoins, of course, the game has gotten way harder. With millions and millions of new coins, the attention and capital have been spread way around. But we know that the good altcoins will still do well. Again, I think I need to be even more explicit when I say this. Altcoins, crypto in general, we are gambling for our future. In the 2025 cycle, this has become extremely hard to do with a high degree of precision, but we're still getting altcoins, meme coins, all kinds of stuff flying to the multi-billions on a regular basis. So you can't tell me that this trade is dead. But one thing I did want to point out here is when I go over my portfolio breakdowns, my altcoin breakdowns, I always start, especially with the big portfolio videos, with a percent allocation on majors, which as you can see here, if we have SOL at 10%, which it has been in the past, but obviously it has grown a lot more than others. So it occupies over 20% of my portfolio. With these breakdowns, you get to 60%. So remember, you have the vast majority of your capital in these high conviction bets. And if you had the vast majority of your capital in these high conviction bets, I just don't see how you lose too much. You could be down, on some of the coins that go poof. You could be down 1%, 2% if you're sizing your bets right. Bet sizing is one of the biggest things that you have to learn in crypto. And so I don't know what to say, but the tools have been laid out. And if you oversize bets, being too greedy into moonshots, then you will get crushed, because crypto does what crypto does. It will fall 80, 90% at times. And that's part of the game. You have to be expecting that. I am not capable of 100% calling winners. That will never be the case. So you need to size bets appropriately. If you sized into Solana and Bitcoin at the beginning of the cycle, Coinbase at the beginning of the cycle, then you would have absolutely crushed it. You certainly wouldn't be down very much, even if you had bought recently. But the altcoin despair, the altcoin negativity that's been built up will reverse. You don't even have to front run it. You can wait for that to happen. But I believe strongly it will reverse. And we are very much so starting to see the beginning signs of this, with Ethereum at least bouncing off of the support on the ETH BTC chart. You can see on the ETH USD chart, really is trying to get over this, $2,700 resistance. Hasn't really been able to do it. Now it's third time to kind of break through. And that's why I say, when you look at this Bitcoin chart, you should just be hoping we come down just one more time into the 102 zone, into the 95 zone. Just one more dip. Please give us a dip, because this trend is going to happen. A lot of the money that's saddled up in US debt is going to recognize that it's an unsustainable system. It's going to flood into better assets like Bitcoin, and in my opinion, the rest of crypto too. So we should be absolutely praying that we get a boring summer, that we get a sell in May and go away. That would be the best case scenario. I'm not going to make any predictions. If it breaks out to the upside, amazing. If it breaks down, amazing. I'm excited to either accumulate more or ride this market and add more higher. When you know that the future over the next few years is going to send Bitcoin and crypto so much higher, you can just take calculated long-term bets. And if we do break out to the upside, there's going to be a lot of charts that look like this. They're probably going to print absolutely giga gains, and I'll be looking into them. So shout out to those. But before we go here, I just wanted to say, on the last episode, I introduced Blackhole, and I have been absolutely blown away as to the incredible reception that this has gotten. On Twitter here, you can see this got over 250,000 views. There has been just thousands and thousands of comments, insane comments, just hyping up the project and saying all kinds of nice things. You can go through this. It's unbelievable how much people are excited for this project. And of course, even at a time like this, when altcoins have been in a tricky spot, to have the faith and belief of the community that are just rallying so hard behind this is just amazing. So thank you all for supporting the project. Obviously, I've been very public that I've never sold any tokens in Super. It's funny because I still get called a dumper when I haven't dumped any tokens, and I held all my tokens from the beginning of the cycle. And every time I even make a move, I talk about it publicly, but I still get called a dumper. I find that funny. One of the fun parts about this project is we removed that entirely, because the team just simply doesn't have tokens to dump and will not have tokens to dump. And I'm sure there's people out there who have sniffed enough glue, will still believe genuinely in their souls that somehow we're dumping. But if I can say, the reality is, to get this kind of a reception on Blackhole after so much hard work has been put in on the tech, the development, the partnerships, the alignment, helping really stack it and intertwine it with the world of Super, making it symbiotic like that, and effectively filling out the other side of the attention liquidity barbell, I'm so excited and so blessed that you guys are going to support the project like this. So shout out to you guys. Make sure you engage here on Twitter. Just make some noise about it. Again, it could be good, it could be bad. No need to glaze, but just tell us what you think about Blackhole. And we're going to make sure to get some airdrop allocations to some of the community who do talk about it. So there you have it. This is going to be one of the biggest wealth transfers that we've ever seen as this money floods out of money markets. The people who get ahead of this in 2025 are going to be ahead of one of the biggest changes that we've seen in decades in the economy. And in my opinion, Bitcoin and crypto are in the perfect place to absorb the vast majority of this value. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, make sure to click on this one popping up right now, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.